cosmic consciousness and the universal mind. This is a vast subject that is basically what I have devoted my life to since I was a small child. And in this stream, I'm going to do my best to offer insight and advice and talk about the experience of creating this dialogue with the universe and how I've experienced that, and offer some advice for navigating it. But it's going to be a quick stream, and I don't even know if I'm going to make it through it. I'm actually in tremendous pain at the moment because I took a little bit of Ambil, which is a mapacho tobacco concentrate that you put on the gums, and then you put mambe, which is a toasted coca with plant salts. And I have a wound in my gum, and the pain is excruciating. I guess I didn't realize that it would do that. So I'll do my best for you guys. I wanted to show you this too. Check it out. It's amazingly beautiful. This is black ayahuasca. It is not Banisteriopsis copy. It is, I think it's Elisa anisipatella. It does not have a chemical analysis, so I can find it anywhere online. The reports are varied. Some people say it has no beta carbolines, which I don't think is true. I think it has lots of harmalas. And also it could contain tryptamines, which I think is correct because I took a tiny sip the other day and it was quite strong. So keep you guys posted because I'm really excited about this. I think it's potentially a just whole new level of life-changing medicine. So yeah, videos with reports coming soon. So where do we start with this? You know, I talk a lot about how there is a revolution in science happening right now that is paradigm changing. And it's not just me. I've noticed, how's it going, Michelle? That there is a lot of talk about this from scientists, that everything is changing, that Darwin is taking a back seat to Lamarck. We're calling it epigenetics instead of just acknowledging that there is some sort of intelligence that guides the process of evolution. We have Michael Levin demonstrating that the electromagnetic field has more dominion over evolution than DNA, which is pretty incredible. He actually said the other day that, you know, the best evidence we have a few weeks ago of being part of a greater intelligence is synchronicity, which was an amazing thing to hear from somebody of his stature as a scientist. If you don't know about his theory of light cones, by the way, it's definitely something to watch the talks. It's so obviously true, but the basic idea is that there is something like intelligence at the level of the subatomic particle, and then that becomes chemical intelligence. And on another level, it's cellular, and then you have organisms, and then you have, towns, cities, entire planet. And then the idea is that if you continue scaling this up, there should be some greater intelligence that is the sum total of all the parts within it. We also have the developments that plants and even single-celled organisms have cognitive capacities that sometimes exceed that of humans with computers in the case of the slime mold. How's it going, s'mores? And please do forgive me if I'm a little bit off. The pain is starting to subside a little bit, so I think we're going to be okay. But yeah, let that be a lesson to you. Don't take Ambil if you have a cut in your mouth. It will hurt a lot. And so, you know, since I started this channel and, you know, decades before that really, but one of the main themes has been that I don't believe that science and spirituality should be mutually exclusive. They should support each other. And this is the position of all the mystery traditions of old that were basically hijacked all the way back in Egypt, according to Albert Pike, the 33rd degree Freemason. The rulers realized that you cannot subjugate, you cannot rule people that are illuminated, that have their own sense of the sovereignty, the divinity of the individual will. And because exposure to these transcendental experiences in this greater mind make people kinder generally. They evolve us to a point where we're able to take responsibility for our own conduct, and then we know that we don't need to be ruled over, and then they won't tolerate it. So all the way back in Egypt, they started having magistrates infiltrate the mysteries. And at that time, Pythagoras happened to have come from Greece to Egypt, and he took initiation in probably the cult of Isis, and brought that back to Greece. And the Eleusinian mysteries are probably the most well-known Greek mysteries. There were others like the Dionysian mysteries. But once again, the Roman consulate figured out that the mysteries were a problem, and they wanted to inculcate Christianity into the being of all the people in order to make them easier to rule over. And so a certain type of magistrate called an archon, this is where the Gnostic archon idea, I think, really comes from. It was a reference to people, not actual spirits. They were magistrates. And so they infiltrated the mysteries, and they took the knowledge and they repackaged it and veiled the secrets and distorted them and corrupted them in such a way as to sort of neuter, to emasculate's not really the right word, but, to disempower these teachings. And that discovery was just a few weeks ago, actually. The Archon was the title of these magistrates. And so a couple of things happened because of that. One of those things is that religion supplanted spirituality, right? One of the main, I guess, point of divergence is that with religion, you have these, dogmatic scriptural rules to follow, and you don't know the reason behind it. It's actually designed to prevent the sort of internal organic processes that are catalyzed by the experiences and the techniques that were used in the mysteries. Those are removed. And so the kind of growth and development that you get from the dialogue with the universal mind is removed from the system, right? And so because people know the truth when they hear it, right? If the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed. They used this knowledge, but they put it into a mythological context and sort of stripped it of its power. And I believe that what is happening right now is that you can only suppress truth to a certain extent. It is like a force in the universe. And if you've ever tried to hold your finger over a hose, you might suppress the water for some time, but then it comes blasting out. And so one of the main, I guess, techniques of control really has been to take the ineffable and reduce it to the level of the mundane. This has been the approach of our culture. It's one of its main fundamental operating principles is this divinity. How do you say divinizing, removing the divinity from our experience and reducing it all to random gobbledygook and chance. And that has left mankind largely with a crisis of purpose. And without this knowledge of the self and the knowledge of how that self is intended to relate to the universe at large, we are lost. And I don't know if it was Terence McKenna or Aldous Huxley that said that if you don't have your compass, if you don't set your compass yourself, someone will do it for you. And so this is being overturned. And at this point, the momentum is so powerful and the necessity so great that it is an unstoppable force. There is no way to turn this back now. Science is recognizing that we are indeed part of some greater consciousness, that nature is not blind and dumb, and the experience of psychedelics, for example, meditation too, any of these things, the real power of it comes from inducing transcendental experiences in people, right? And so people talk about ego death, which I'm not a huge fan of. But when you bring down the filters in the nervous system and you expose the individual ego to this greater network of intelligence and consciousness in the universe, the individual is raised to a greater and greater vantage point. We are able to experience more subtle expressions of the universe that inform and guide and enrich our experience in such a way that we actually develop a greater capacity to express our soul in a meaningful way, right? This is liberation. And the process is very thoroughly mapped out at this point. We are, in a way, the luckiest generation in the history of mankind in this sense, because we have access to all of the tools and we know what we're doing. We know what shadow work is. We know what individuation is. We have access to scientific knowledge. We have access to all of the, great mystical teachings of the ages. And I keep mentioning Terence McKenna, but he talked about this archaic revival. He noticed that techno music with its repetitive, doom, 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 that is just like a ceremonial drum, just like a heartbeat, and further, the reemergence of this sort of understanding that was passed down in the lineages of the mysteries and other traditions is reemerging. And we are in a position to actually be custodians of that to a degree that has never been seen before in the kind of numbers that we have. But back to the archaic revival thing, I started to diverge a little bit too much there. I've been in the Sacred Valley in Peru for a while, and I've been digging around in the old Incan ruins and talking to Quechua people. And what I'm discovering is that this knowledge that first was sort of not formulated, but emerged in a methodical system, in a almost a tangible form, is actually present in all of these ancient cultures to a degree that is highly specific. The idea that the true scripture is writ large upon the land for those who have eyes to see it is absolutely substantiated. What I was saying about the Inca, the things that I've discovered recently, as above, so below, they had this concept, just like the mystery traditions in Babylonia, Syria, Greece, the Hermetic tradition, all of that. As above, so below was a thing. They totally understood that. The focus on duality. There was something even more specific that I discovered the other day. Oh, the all is in the all, right? There's this medicine song here. Todo cura, todo sana, todo tiene medicina dentro. Everything cures, everything heals, everything has medicine inside. But they also say, todo tiene fuego dentro, todo tiene agua dentro, todo tiene aire dentro, todo tiene tierra dentro, llevo universo dentro, todo tiene universo dentro. So everything has fire inside, everything has water inside, everything has air inside, everything has earth inside, everything is carrying a universe inside. The all is in the all. It's the same exact knowledge. And then we also have this ubiquitous recognition of gold being a crystallized piece of consciousness to the alchemists, to the Incas, to the Aztecs, to the Egyptians, Babylonian Syrians. They all knew this. They all knew that our light, our consciousness comes from light. And now we have people like Penrose and Hameroff that have actually done, experiments that show that microtubules in the brain are slurping up light. So there's this tremendous confirmation that Albert Pike in 1851 in Morals and Dogma, in case you're not aware of who he is, he was a 33rd degree Mason, the sovereign commander of the southern jurisdiction of the United States just after the Civil War. In his book, he says that man had the truth and found error. And this research and experience that I've been doing all these years has just increasingly confirmed that this, at one point, mankind had this knowledge ubiquitously. We did understand why we were here, how it works, where we came from. There's overwhelming evidence even that the Incans understood the electromagnetic field and its role in consciousness. And in ceremony, they would use meteorites that had been rolled into balls. And I first learned this at the Temple of the Sun. The shaman told me they use it to concentrate the energy of Inti. Well, the meteorites concentrate the electromagnetic field. Some types of meteorites generate their own electromagnetic fields or distort them in interesting ways. So, yeah, it's a quite remarkable thing to see that, despite the fact that people point out that the myths are different, that the allegories are different, but it's not the same kind of difference that we have in our modern religions that people fight over details. The schisms within the Christian religion that create all these offshoots, Protestant and, Unitarian and all the different ones, or even worse, Islam versus Judaism, or, these are arguments about a name, right? Or some detail of doctrine that, drives people to war and whatnot. The reality is, before these religions were created in order to divide and create these schisms, the allegories all meant the same thing. They were all teaching the same knowledge and understanding. So it's a very different kind of conflict, and I think that because we have become accustomed to viewing these religious systems in this way, we've missed, a lot of us, the reality that it's not just that behind the religions there's the same message of be kind to your neighbor and love people and whatnot. That's true, hopefully, but it's something much, much deeper than that that has been lost and is now being rediscovered. And so, let's see, I don't have a ton of time. Let me check in with the chat and make sure. If you guys have any questions or anything that you would like me to address too, I'll be happy. Hi from downstairs. Oh, good. Jesus is in the chat. Okay, so the question, I guess, then becomes, and this, like I said, I only have an hour tonight and only a half hour left, so I can't really get into, in deep details, but we'll continue talking about this, obviously. One of the most important aspects of this, and one of the fundamental differences between this kind of approach, this sort of gnosis, I guess, is that knowledge of the physical world, understanding of sciences, studying philosophy, understanding geometry, all of these things are part of your spiritual growth and development. And one of the things that I see that I think is impeding the development of a lot of people, it's basically the influence of these older religions. Even when we break away from them, we still have inculcated into our psychology and really our ontological, processes, these ideas of faith and sort of this implication that, people believe whatever and that's, good. And it doesn't need to be based on anything but intuition and a feeling in the heart. And in my opinion, that is just dangerously bad practice, and the real process actually comes from learning to see the allegories and metaphors that are written in nature, that are conveyed by science, to take the axioms and the principles of Hermeticism, for example, that are found in the Kabbalion, and see how they actually apply to all systems, to actually interpret the universe in order to gain knowledge and wisdom. And so this anti-intellectualism that we have even in the pop culture spirituality movement right now, I think is actually very, very detrimental to the proper development of an illuminated race of people. And I say this a lot, but this is one of the most important facts that we have to come to terms with and live in accordance with, right? We have to walk with knowledge wisely. And, sorry, this pain in my jaw just totally came back and derailed my train of thought. Okay, so, right now, for example, in the United States, we have almost a civil war between the left and the right. It might actually get to that point. I wouldn't be surprised. And one of the wedge issues, I guess, is which political system actually makes sense. There are people actually on the right calling for fascism, as a solution to the problems in the United States, and then we have people calling for socialism, and there are even communists and, all sorts of people with all kinds of different ideas about how things should be done. The simple reality is this: there is no ism schism game that is going to change anything until the consciousness of the people on the planet has changed. And this is a different approach to change that I'm describing here. We're not talking about force feeding dogmas and beliefs into people's minds and then expecting them to act in accordance with this. That's not possible. That doesn't work. We've seen the consequences and the effects of that. We've seen the efficacy of that approach, for 2,000 years, and obviously it's not good and it doesn't work, right? So there was, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. I think it's a French title, the Comte or Comte, C-O-M-T-E, de Phoenix. I believe he lived in the late 1700s or something. It's referred to as the paradox of the Comte de Phoenix. The absolute rule of the state will be a function of the absolute liberty of the individual will. And at first, that can sound a bit off, but what he's actually saying is that it is not until people have attained illumination on a mass scale that there will be any kind of complete adherence to any kind of laws or moral code. These things have to be the result of internal processes and transcendental experience and the delineation and integration of real wisdom. And then you can have absolute rule of the state, because it will be a function of an expression of the authentic person, freed from the influence of culture and religion and trauma and all of these things, So this is our goal. This is what's on our plate. And there is no other way to do it. That's the reality. We are going to continue to tank and slide into a greater and greater catastrophe until we cease to exist. I know a lot of you guys are probably Tool fans, and there's a great song, the only song that I think is really good on Fear Inoculum that talks about this, called Descending. And, he's saying, stay our swan song and epilogue, stay our grand finale, the reading of our swan song and epilogue. And basically, if we do not, he's calling all to arms and order. We must all fully formulate our will to attain the highest expression possible of ourselves and employ all of these tools simultaneously in order to lift ourselves up. And this is one of the places where spirituality and science are suddenly really coming together, right? We can draw certainty because in this system, there's no faith. You don't want faith in anything. You want certainty, not faith. And so, for example, we know from the law of entrainment that anything that cycles draws like cycles up with it. The lower cycle entrains with the higher, right? So one person lifts themselves up. The entire electromagnetic field connects all of the minds. The whole, the collective, has no choice but to rise in response to any individual lifting themselves up, even without direct contact or influence, in my opinion. So that, for me, is a tremendous source of hope, that we know, as any good magician knows, that we have the ability to affect and influence the universe invisibly, like a magician. And another thing that gives us hope and confidence and faith in all of this is that entrainment pulls upwards. So those that are trying to pull down cannot have any effect on the ones that are rising up. It's just a scientific impossibility. This is why the old magicians were so confident that they could constrain a demon to their will, because what they were really saying when they said, God constrains you, the laws of God, they were really saying entrainment, compels you to God's will, to the higher cycle. And it's absolutely true and factual. Another mind-blowing development that really might be the most important thing that science will ever discover. We're still a hair away from proving this absolutely, but I think most of us already know that it's true. They recently observed biphoton pairs that are entangled, and somehow there's evidence that consciousness arises from this entanglement. So that implies that our minds are entangled with particles that could be anywhere in the universe. So all of our internal processes are fundamentally connected to all of the other people, plants, animals. We are in a net of being. And so every thought that we have, every movement that we make, every breath that we take has some subtle influence on the entire universe, and certainly on the collective consciousness of mankind. Right? And so, knowing this, we should not be discouraged. We should not allow dissonance patterns to enter into our being and create an interference. We can focus even entirely on our own developments and our own processes, knowing that it's not selfish and that it benefits the totality of creation to do this for ourselves. Let me check the time, because we're having ceremony in a bit. The power of Christ compels me. Yeah. Other chat. Someone put this man on a podcast. Isn't that what I'm doing already? Okay, so yeah, I'm running out of time here, so let me see if I can pull this all together. I mean, in terms of really giving a just an overview of all this. I think I've pretty much said everything that can be said about it. And I'll just set up the next live stream now. How about that? The process for successfully navigating this transition from normal consciousness to higher consciousness is actually fraught with peril. One of the tragedies of the pop culture spirituality movement in general now, and it's largely due to the influence of profit motive, which I don't really fundamentally have a problem with, but it definitely causes issues. And one of those things is that these systems are formatted and engineered for marketability, not necessarily for reality. There's an old African proverb that he who speaks the truth has few friends, right? And so this focus on love and light and fluffiness and, sitting around huffing unicorn farts and blowing lines of fairy dust will only get you so far. And if you ignore the darkness, the monsters that are standing right behind you, you refuse to be aware of them, they're just going to devour you, and so it is actually necessary to develop a skill set. You don't just channel spirits, for example, traditionally in any system that, shamanism or the Western mysteries, without having thorough training in the protocol and an understanding of the possibilities. And, all of this stuff should be approached in the same way that you would if you were trying to become a physicist or, any kind of highly technical, highly involved system, and because we come from a culture that doesn't really have respect for the office of the shaman and the magician and whatever other names you can come up with, we have a tendency to sort of underappreciate the necessity for real study and awareness, the necessity to develop critical thinking, for example, to have some kind of background in psychoanalysis. Self-psychoanalysis actually isn't even that difficult to learn, and also to have realistic, non-superstitious understanding of the limitations of what we call magic. Our ability to, what is the stock definition? Engage with this science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will, to have realistic expectations about what can be derived from that, the kind of time frames that it takes to actually manifest things in the way that people, manifestation coaches try to sell the idea that it's just something anybody can just sit down and think up a, big fat bank account or, you have to actually develop this skill set. You have to actually go through the process of integrating shadow, but also really fearlessly, thoroughly developing the capacity to heal all of your traumas and to prepare a fertile soil for these new organisms to flourish in, this knowledge to flourish in. I can tell you from personal experience that one of the worst things that can happen is that you attain more power than you have wisdom. For me, my self-sabotaging tendencies and other types of self-esteem issues that I did not resolve before I really managed to sort of connect with the universal mind and developed a sort of capacity to engage with reality and shape it in a way that's preternatural, borderline supernatural sometimes. I had not fixed all of this stuff yet. So I was able to create all of these extraordinary, nearly impossible situations, but I would destroy them, and that is, by the way, the reason why the Fool is the number 0, and also the first card in the tarot deck, because the tarot deck is not really about divination fundamentally. It is more of a archetypal map of the journey that we undergo when we step foot on this path. And the fool destroys what he creates. But if the fool is able to attain the philosopher's stone and to garner knowledge and to increase his discipline so that his force of his will and the force of his thought is not like gunpowder in a void, it's actually channeled into a controlled and subtle and specific, powerful conduit that actually has, lasting effect. If the fool is able to attain this, then he becomes the magus, and the one last thought I want to leave you guys with, just because it's on my mind, and I'm trying to offer as much hope as I can that we can be successful collectively at this sort of revolution or evolution. People have noticed that in the plant medicine community and also the New Agers, a lot of them, there are a tremendous amount of narcissists all of a sudden, or at least that's how it appears. And so it's causing a lot of doubt in the effectiveness of things like ayahuasca and these other, things that are employed by New Age spirituality and whatnot. But I want to offer that I've noticed, and this isn't just something I've noticed, this, you'll find this in the writings of all of the people that think about this kind of stuff, if they're legitimately informed. There's generally an ego inflation period, right? And that is necessary because we are working with reflections. And so in order to deal with these things, we have to be confronted by them. And there are ways around this, and this is why I keep talking about learning self-psychoanalysis and, shadow integration, all this kind of stuff. Because if you have the capacity and the courage and the determination to confront all these things without, I always ask the medicine because of this to shine the light where we have been unable or unwilling to look, right? If you are willing to see everything, then you might not have to go through this. This is why the Sephiroth and the Tree of Life, there are different paths, because the choices that you make and, your capacity to do all this effectively can determine whether you go through, straight up the middle or through the path of severity and ego inflation and all that. You know what I mean? But what I'm getting at here is I think this explosion of apparent narcissism, because this movement or this development kind of took off for people around the same time, we could see the process expressing in the collective. So this apparent ego inflation that's happening across the board with so many people does not necessarily mean that we have failed, that the medicines don't work. It is just the macro going through the same process that the individuals do. So that just actually kind of occurred to me the other day, and it made me pretty happy to realize that maybe things aren't as bleak as they sometimes seem. So I have to go and set up our mats and build a fire, and I will let you guys know how it goes with the black ayahuasca. By the way, actually, real quick, while I'm on that subject, I've gotten a lot of responses from people that it's a dark medicine, and my experience is limited. I only had a small amount the other night, but I didn't get that feeling at all. And I have friends that drink black ayahuasca regularly and only, in one case. None of them describe this. So I think what it is that it has a reputation for increasing magical power. And so Brujas use it a lot. And so, just for the record, if anybody has this negative association, I think that's what it is. It's the utility of the medicine that lends itself to something that can be dark. But it's just all about context. So don't be prejudiced against black ayahuasca. It's not cool. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please consider becoming a patron. We are demonetized, and so we get nothing from YouTube. Also, we still have events happening. It's possible to still come this month towards the end, maybe the last week of September. I'm going to do maybe a couple of private 10-day retreats for people in, let's see, September, October. And then November, we are going to integrate mushroom foraging because it's morel season. And the local Quechua tell me they're everywhere, and morels are amazing. So we'll also be looking for medicinal mushrooms and other gourmet, but specifically for morels, and then also our regular medicine regimen. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me, and we will get deeper and deeper into this stuff. So subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss anything, and I'll see you guys again very soon.